Okay, we were just talking about him with Ben Shapiro. You can follow him on Twitter at Dinesh D'Souza, and his new book, The Big Lie, is out. What's the following to The Big Lie? I don't have all the words right. About exposing the left's Nazi roots. Forgive me.
Exposing the Nazi roots of the American left.
There you go. That's a mouthful. And I'm glad that I let you say it, not me. But Dinesh is fantastic if you read his books. What I love about his books is they can go through issues point by point so you can reference them. So that's always useful, especially for young people when you're reading a book, if it's just entirely kind of thematic and it's tough to follow. So Dinesh, you also just wrote this article you sent to me about debunking the lie that Trump is a fascist. Now, we've done a lot of work on this as well. We've presupposed that Bernie is more of a fascist than Trump. But explain to the audience your stance there.
Well, we could start by talking about fascist economics. Now, if you look up the definition of fascism, you'll see under the economic category, state-run capitalism. That's what fascism means. Trump is trying to reduce the power of the government, to increase the power of the private sector. Fascism moves in the opposite direction. If you look at the policies of the Democratic Party, even Obama over the past 8 years, we haven't really seen, strictly speaking, socialism, because in socialist countries, the government tries to nationalize private industry.
Right.
But under Obama, what we see is private industry remains private. We still have private hospitals, we have private health insurance companies, but the government tells them what to do. Right. And similarly, under Obama, we saw increasing federal regulation of banks, investment houses, energy companies. Bernie and Hillary wanted to expand federal control of higher education. So this is, quite strictly speaking, state-run capitalism. Another word for it is fascism.
Yeah, and a lot of people, a new term people have used is crony capitalism or corporatism. So basically what you're doing is bringing it back to the actual definition. People won't find this on Google, by the way. What's funny is it says fascism, it refers to it as right-wing, and if you Google communism, no mention of it being left. So I think people have really turned around the spectrum.
It's almost as if they're lying.
It's almost as if they're being misleading, Dinesh.
Well, here's the thing, that all of this, there's a sort of a history of this. And in the 20s and 30s, fascism was understood to be on the left, both by the fascists themselves and by their critics.
Right.
Mussolini was a Marxist. He was the leader of Italian socialism. He and Gramsci were the two biggest names in Italian socialism. When Mussolini came to power, Lenin sent a telegram of congratulations, basically acknowledging a fellow revolutionary on the left.
Yes.
Hitler, we all know, was a National Socialist, changed the name of the German Workers' Party to stick in National Socialism. So what happened is that after World War II, when fascism and Nazism became ineradicably stained with the odor of Holocaust, that's when the progressives who were coming to power in the universities said, oh, gee, this is very bad for us. If fascism is seen on the left, young people are going to sort of have the goods on us and they're going to look elsewhere. So we need to do a little bit of a cover-up operation here, and let's see if we can move fascism from the left-wing column into the right-wing column. So we're seeing the legacy of this preposterous sleight of hand, and that's part of what I love to do in the book. It's not just about Trump. I'm blowing the cover on sort of 100 years of secret history, which helps us really understand what these things like fascism, Nazism, what do they actually mean?
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because when we started doing this with Bernie videos, downvote, 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 we've talked about this, and it'll lead into the next topic. And then more recently, when we've talked about Bernie and compared his policies directly with communists, directly with known socialists or fascists, the similarities are striking. We've even gone quote for quote, and people are much more open-minded now because I think they're waking up. And that's something I wanted to bring up. Now, this next clip will seem unflattering because Cenk is being a jerk. But I wanted to bring us up to contrast what happened with Ben and Cenk recently, because the audience has shifted, in large part due to people like yourself and Ben, and sometimes yours truly, but not a whole lot. This was, I think, 2 years ago, Dinesh's debate.
An unknown quantity is more dangerous than a known crook.
So, first of all, Dinesh, you keep calling her a crook, but you just got out of jail.
You should. Let's give Dinesh a second.
Now, I don't say that at all because he insulted you to show, well, look at you. But what he did in your debate and we talked about this when you were on this, he just looked to the audience, right? Because it was stacked against you. Now with Ben Shapiro there, the audience is becoming more split. There are a lot of younger people who are starting, and it's not that there are more people following Ben than you, it's that the younger demographic is shifting. In part, I think a big turning point was your debate with Cenk. I don't know if you remember when you were on the show, it was all upvoted, people loved him, and we said, did you watch what he actually said? It was either about personal issues, and marital issues, or personal financial issues, and everyone went back, and all of a sudden, within 2 weeks, his stuff was downvoted, and he hemorrhaged in audience. Have you seen that switch?
Well, in the actual event itself, as I looked in the audience, Cenk kind of came in with an entourage. He had a robotic group of about 24 people who were literally planted in the audience to yell and scream no matter what he said. So he sort of had, I think in parties they're called party pumpers.
Yes.
But in a debate, he had debate pumpers. And these were, they were in a sense, if this had been Mussolini's Italy, these guys would have been black shirts because they were robotic. It didn't matter what was said. They weren't listening. They had no capacity, as far as I could see, to listen. And with Cenk, I realized, I'm dealing with a kind of intellectual hooligan. I'm dealing with someone who has no elasticity of mind, and somebody who's essentially going to rely on a sort of brutal verbal thuggery to try to win the debate. Now, I could have done the same, but I thought I'm not going to do that because I want people to be able to sit back. And so sure enough, and I've had this happen to me on campuses. I'll debate a guy, the campus audience is completely in his camp. The debate gets aired on C-SPAN, it's a completely different reaction.
Yes. Yeah, that's what's so important about it is, again, I think we talked about this. You have people, just in our recent Hawaii special, people you can talk with, you can convince, you have a conversation, and the people who you can't, you have to recognize the difference and make an example of them. And I think, you're not trying to convince Cenk at that point. You're convincing the rest of the people on YouTube watching C-SPAN. And I think you did a good job of it. Speaking of which, so it goes back to the big lie. When we were in Hawaii and we went to the federal building to protest the protesters who were demanding no more Homeland Security, no more ICE, $1,500 as a universal basic income per month. They didn't allow us in the building. And while we were waiting outside for our turn, someone was sent to say that we were Bosnian terrorists at the federal building, hoping we get tased and tackled. Again, this kind of goes back to the obfuscating of the left. Historically, is this something that you cover in your book, the tactics of just accusing your opposition of doing what you're doing? Well, we're really Mussolini. No. Mussolini was right-wing. You're fascists. To someone just looking at American politics, the most obvious analogy to the fascists would be these Antifa thugs, right? These guys wear costumes, they have masks, they carry weapons, they use intimidation and violence. But I think that they are less threatening than the more powerful figures, which would be something like the Hollywood studio bosses. Now, here's what I mean. The Nazis had a term called Gleichschaltung. The term actually means coordination, but what the Nazis wanted to do was get all sectors of society into sync with Nazi ideology. Nobody's allowed to get out of line, out of step, so to speak. And here we see in academia, in media, in Hollywood, that you have to toe the line. The reason we have a secret organization of conservatives that meets in secret and shows up in disguise is those guys know that these people have the power to hurt you. Yeah. And so that we have Gleichschaltung in America. It's called political correctness, and it's enforced by the left. It isn't just guys on the street in Berkeley. It's very powerful people who control our cultural institutions. But the beauty of that is that now, and I think even more so than 2 years ago with Cenk, considering the money that he got from Qatar and the money they got from a former Republican governor, his name slips my mind, the left sort of invested in new media and the right has caught up. And now that they've caught up, not necessarily in funding, we're still obviously nowhere near the Young Turks funding, but it's more of a form of ideas, and that's how you're seeing more young people becoming conservative. Final question here, because we've covered this a lot, talking about Bernie and Hitler and National Socialists, the Nazi roots. How much, for people who will say that's hyperbolic, how much of your title, The American Left, Their Nazi Roots, is used to get people to read the book versus it being a very literal comparison that you're willing to defend?
No, it's, Stephen, it's an absolutely literal comparison. And let me say it very briefly this way. Hitler got 3 of his most destructive genocidal ideas either from American progressives or from the Democratic Party. Hitler got his idea for Lebensraum, the whole notion of throwing the Slavs, the Poles, the Eastern Europeans, the Russians off their land, resettling it with German families, and enslaving the people who remained. Hitler specifically said, I got this from the Jacksonian Democrats.
Right.
By the way, there's a whole body of historical scholarship that supports this. I'm not saying anything that mainstream historians reject. Here's the key difference. They don't blame the Democratic Party. They try to put the blame on America. Hitler got his ideas from America, as though he'd been reading the Declaration of Independence. No, he's specifically getting his ideas, from the eugenicists, the progressives around Margaret Sanger. They had talked not just about forced sterilization, but one of them came up with a blueprint for what he called lethal chambers to euthanize people. The Nazis went, great idea. Let's use carbon monoxide gas. And long before the final solution for the Jews, Hitler was killing off the sick, the disabled, the so-called imbeciles, the unfit. And he got that idea straight from American progressives. So I could go on, but you can see this is not just Jonah Goldberg. I'm not just talking about liberal fascism in some vague ideological sense.
Right.
I'm talking about the actual schemes that the Nazis derived from America. This was Hitler and the Nazis implemented in Nazi Germany.
That's what I was looking for in an answer, to stick the landing, because so many people ask us that question when we draw that comparison, when we take quote for quote and we do the videos. Nope. It's an absolute literal comparison, and we're not misusing the word literally. We mean a quite literal comparison in policy. And as LeVar Burton said, you don't have to take my word for it, only it's not a 6-year-old with a coloring book out. It's Dinesh D'Souza, a gentleman and a scholar. The book is The Big Lie. You can follow him on Twitter at Dinesh D'Souza. Where's the next place people can find you, Dinesh? I mean, I think they'll be able to...
I'm all over Twitter, and DineshD'Souza.com is my website. And the book, of course, is available everywhere. I'm happy to say, given my past troubles with Costco, Costco is a big order for the book. You can get it in Costco.
There you go. You can get yourself a bottle of 500 krill oil pills and The Big Lie.